I'm Leslie Greer, and I'll be your host for your episode of Hey Listen. And our topic today is astrology. Now that means that we take into consideration your birth, and the stars' positions. It's very interesting, so don't go away. We'll have a commercial break, and we'll be right back. Our guest today is Phil Baker, who specializes in astrology. I have a few questions to direct to him. Can you tell me about your background?
I certainly can. I've been an astrologer for 15 years, and when I was in college, I studied history and English, wrote a few plays, and did not think I would do this. And when I got done with college, I thought I would go into one field and didn't work out. So I got interested in astrology through a friend and started doing it for a hobby and then a little bit for clients to see how long, until something else came along. And then I've still been doing it 15 years later.
I see. So a friend was also an astrologer?
No, just had an interest, like a hobby, that sort of thing, really.
I see. Well, how did this fascination with astrology, where did that come from?
That's a good question, because I didn't know about it all the time I was in school, and I just started reading about it, and it just seemed to be a thing that I fell into, almost as if I was being pushed to do it. I'm still not really sure why I've stayed in it and why I like it so much, but I've met many, many different kinds of people and had a lot of unique experiences that I certainly would have had no other way, and learned a lot.
I see. So you learned, you became interested 15 years ago, and prior to that, your interests were what?
Prior to that, I had been mostly interested in like history, writing, communications, fields along those lines.
And you graduated from college in majoring in history?
I majored in history and I minored in English. I also was quite interested in theater, drama, and wrote a few plays that were produced in college at that time as well.
Do you still write?
Occasionally, I still have an interest in all those fields.
Ooh, that's very interesting. The word astrology, is that similar to stargazing, or why did they come up with the word astrology?
It's a Greek word, basically, and it's been a while since I've checked it out. I think it means the study of the heavens or stars or whatever, but actually astrology has nothing to do with stars, stargazing, or anything else. It actually has a lot to do with time, place, the planets, that sort of thing, longitude, latitude, that sort of thing.
Well, how do you get this table? How do you line them up and figure this out?
Well, you do a lot of boring mathematical work for that. Now a lot of it is computerized. And what you do is you take the person's birth data, usually, well, I'll give you an example. Suppose somebody were born June 5th, 1958 at 6 p.m. in Rochester. You would take that information and you would do various calculations, setting up to see where the planets were exactly for that time, place, hour that the person was born. And then starting from there, you would do all the calculations, and that would be the horoscope. That would be what you would be starting working with, the blueprint, really.
I see. Can you predict the future, you know, based on when the person was born and all, without telling you the time? Or do I need to give you that specific time in order to do this reading?
I would say about 20% of my clients aren't sure of their exact time. And if you don't know the time, it isn't a good idea to guess. You can do work for a person who doesn't know the time, definitely. You can do an analysis of the birth horoscope, and you can do some things about future trends, but it's not the same thing. You can't get it in quite as much depth as if you do know the time. So you can do it, but it's not as in much depth.
So if I were to want to look into the future, like, but I was off a little bit onto the time, if I was more accurate, then you could give the client a 100% reading.
You certainly can give them more information. As I've said, if you do know the time, that's certainly true. However, it depends on what method you're going to use to predict. There are many different methods that astrologers do use to predict. And let me say a word about...
Oh, methods? Now, could you describe that, what you mean by methods?
Well, I don't want to get too technical. The most common way of predicting is what we call transits, and these are simply the planets as they would be at any given point in time, as they would relate to the birth horoscope.
Oh. Now, how much is, there are 12 birth signs, is that correct?
That's correct.
Why is there the different names, Aries and Cancer and all of that?
That's just a matter of convenience going back a few thousand years to the ancient Greeks. And everybody by now, at least in the Western world, has adopted them. Actually, in India and in China, Japan, they have their own version of astrology.
What would be like the difference? Could you tell me anything of those
Yeah, but
cultures and their names?
Yeah, I could, but we would probably be here about 6 more hours. So.
Just pick one. I know in Japan,
Okay.
an astrology, they use the year of the, is that the same idea?
That's exactly right. Briefly, they divide everything up into 12, what we would call animal signs. They have a different method, but each of those signs, for example, we are now in the year of the snake, according to Chinese and Japanese astrology. And then they would give certain descriptions as to what each of the years meant, both in terms of the individual born in that year and in terms of prediction, too.
So in Japan, it's one thing. In American, is there any similarity or any way that they can interact?
I have not studied Chinese and Japanese astrology in great detail. From what I've seen so far, except for the 12 signs, there doesn't seem to be a great deal. Actually, Indian astrology has more in common with what we use in America.
Really? So your astrology is your main job right now?
That's correct, and has been for a long time.
Where do you work, or?
I work in Rochester, out of my home. I have a room in there where I do my interviews and this sort of thing, tapings, etc.
So people come to your home. Is there a good number of people that do this?
Yes, fortunately. Also, I have clients who live out of state, too. For example, California, Washington, Ohio, and on, that I've never met.
Now, if you were to, suppose that a person came into you, you can look over them. Can you, like, integrate that and give them a more accurate reading than if you had never to have seen them, like incorporate body language, something like that?
Probably so. Just like anyone is going to be able to deal better with a person as a totality if they're there with them. I'm actually quite interested in body language. I've read a fair amount on it. So I don't doubt that consciously or subconsciously it may enter my mind, but when I'm analyzing a horoscope, I try consciously at least to concentrate only on that.
I see. How do people know about you? Do you advertise? Are you in the telephone book, or how do people find you?
I am in the phone book, in the white pages. I also write a column in a newspaper, a local newspaper called The Shopping Bag every week, which is sent to many, many homes. I've been in the past on radio. I've given lectures around to various groups in the community, and of course, word of mouth, clients who've been pleased with what I do.
So you have worked on a radio show before?
Oh yes, I've been on several.
In astrology?
Oh yes.
So that means that if people were to dial on the phone, you could talk on the phone, and it's a live show, and you could give them information?
Yeah, we used to have some very interesting times with it. The phone would be backed up for quite a while, and you would do one person, and then bam, on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, for sometimes half hour, an hour. Once I went on for 3 hours straight.
Whoa. Right now you work in Rochester. How did you get in contact with people in California, and how did they become familiar with you?
Well, in terms of California clients, a client of mine had moved from Rochester to California, gave my name to a few friends, who in turn gave my name to their friends, and so on and so forth.
So if you were to suppose that I was to become your client, a customer, and I would meet with you and give you the information of date of birth and etc., or do I give you that information prior to our meeting in person?
Okay, the way it works is that the person would give me the information before we came, because I would have to set up the horoscope, do the work, analyze it, which is a fairly lengthy process. I would set her up, and then when you were ready, when we had a mutually convenient time, you would come, I would do the interview for you, and then at that time, you would ask me any questions you might have, or whatever.
What kind of interview? What form would that take?
Okay, my usual form, when the person comes to the house as opposed to being out of state, is they come over and I analyze, first of all, the natal horoscope, or the birth horoscope, in great detail, covering the character, career potential, relationships, travel, for example, many, many different fields. And then, of course, we do predictions for about a year. And if during the interview or after a person has any questions, they're free to ask. And of course, all the work that I do is confidential.
Oh, certainly. So during the interview, how long would that take?
As a general rule, it takes about an hour. Depending on the variation of the horoscope and what questions the clients may have, it could go a little over that, but usually about an hour.
Thank you. We need to take a commercial break right now. Our next segment will be very interesting. I had given him my birth date and place, and after this commercial break, we'll come right back for that. Right now, first, before he gives a response, I was born in December 22nd, and where the time was 12:16 noon, not at midnight, but noon, 12:16, and the place was Bachfaden in West Germany. So I had already given him this information prior to today.
Okay. Okay. The sun in your horoscope is in Capricorn, and the moon is in Virgo. And in astrology, we always start out with what we call the sun-moon combination. This is the basic nature of the way you are as a person and how you might want to express yourself in terms of your friendships, career, hobbies, interests, etc. With this particular sun-moon combination, we have someone who often projects to the world as being a very confident, outgoing kind of person, but actually may not feel as confident as you would appear with this. This is a very good sun-moon combination for communication.
That's true.
And obviously you do work in a communicative field, but anyone with this would need to express their ideas quite strongly. So any work that related to this, and not only one kind of work, but it could even be communicating in several different fields is possible with this sun-moon combination here. You would be very open-minded, but basically it's more conventional. And so you would want, if possible, to have a fair amount of status, live in a nice part of town, so to speak. This is pretty good for money, and it eventually indicates a fair amount of financial security here that usually you would want to earn on your own as opposed to feeling that anyone gave anything to you. It's a very independent kind of a sun-moon combination in many ways. It also indicates that you can be quite critical and even sarcastic when you make your mind up with this particular sun-moon combination. Very good powers of analysis here. Good powers of reason, logic, that sort of thing. And you would have a hard time in friendships or in romantic relationships and being involved with somebody that was not quite at your level mentally. Actually, in my opinion, this would be the sort of thing you should be looking for in interacting with other people. Good mental rapport as opposed to other things. Not that the other things aren't important, but you would really need this one quality to be happy in my opinion here. This chart gives very, very strong ambition, driving ambition, actually, at some point with the horoscope. Good horoscope for success. It's a little better for success in career than personal, so you might find that your greatest fulfillment in life will come through your career as opposed to concentrating too much on personal matters, maybe your domestic matters, that sort of thing. Not that you shouldn't do this, of course, but that in your case the career would be a little more likely to give you fulfillment and success. The chart gives good energy. Probably it gives very good judgment, a certain amount of organizational ability, or maybe even executive ability. So at some point, you might well be in a position of responsibility or authority. You could probably handle that quite well with this. It gives a liking for travel, and travel would be very good for you here at some point. It also gives a lot of involvement at some point with people of a different background.
Right.
With people of a different background or culture than yourself. So you're not the kind of person that only wants to hang around with people who share just your interests and that's it, but the more the better. This is truer of you than it would be for many people. This will always be the case. An interesting factor also about the horoscope is a tendency that, especially as you get older, to do better when you get in situations that require you to make a lot of changes, transformations in your life. We might say that you're not really here to just have a really secure, harmonious, placid existence. You need a lot of challenges all the time in terms of your work and your other activities. And in my opinion, you probably will get them with this particular chart here. It is very good for dealing with the public. And so the chart would indicate a lot of benefit through that. It indicates that you yourself, in my opinion, probably have very strong intuition. And you can use it, and probably do use it, a lot of times in your work, in analyzing people, that sort of thing. So although you have good powers of logic and reason, as I've said, in your case, when you're making an important decision, probably your intuition is going to be a little more reliable even than the other with this particular combination here. The chart does give...
Really?
The chart does give a tendency at times to overindulge oneself, so you should watch out in spending money, things like that. You always do best if you have a more moderate or prudent attitude about everything here. The main problem in the horoscope would be any tendency that you would have to go to extremes in terms of opinions, activities, financially, or like that. If you don't do this, then you're going to lead a lot more pleasant, easy lifestyle here. This chart also would indicate, again, a strong independence, and you're not the kind of person that needs that needs to go out of your way a lot for other people here. You're very individualistic, and if you want people to like you or get along with them, you basically kind of assume that they've got to take you as you are with this particular Sun-Moon combination here, and that's an interesting factor with it too. This chart would indicate at some point possible benefit financially through other people's money or resources here. Now, this can take place in a number of ways. It could be regarding investments, inheritance, joint finances, any number of things. But if possible, from a financial standpoint, you should always try to bring other people's resources into this. This is usually financial. It could even be advice, of course, or just working with other people as opposed to constantly working on your own. For example, owning a store, doing the work, going home, that sort of thing. You should try to bring as many other people into your endeavors as you possibly can with this Sun-Moon combination. The moon makes what we call a difficult aspect to Saturn, which sometimes indicates periodic emotional depression, lowered emotional themes at times here. So, of course, you always do best whenever this happens to project yourself to the world, go out and do something, as opposed to just sitting home and worrying about it. I should emphasize that since we are going to do that in this format, and since an interview takes at least an hour, that we're giving you here the basics. Obviously, other things can modify this to a degree, and we're not even bringing in certain other factors. So what I'm giving you here are the basic, some of the basic personality types of interest here. Also, obviously, in terms of career, this does indicate an interest in a career with a lot of excitement, if possible. This is a good chart for competition, by the way. And if you have to compete with someone to achieve a goal, you would be quite likely to succeed, in my opinion here, with this. Sometimes, too, however, there's a tendency to be a bit too blunt or direct. And when you get worked up about an idea or about an interest or whatever, at times, you just say what you think. And sometimes if that happens, you may run into a little opposition from people who don't agree with you with this. But overall, it's a pretty strong horoscope. It has a lot of what we call earth and fire signs in it, which some astrologers have called a steamroller type of horoscope, which means a person that is very oriented toward achieving success in the world around her, more than anything else, and is very likely to do so. But again, for the same reason, there may be some more success in terms of your career than in your personal life, where these qualities are not always as appreciated. And that will give you some idea of the sort of things that we're talking about here.
Do you agree? I put the question to you. Could you show us your book?
Sure.
Maybe
Sure, I can.
Relating to my birthday, perhaps, or whatever.
This is called an ephemeris, and it is the book that all astrologers use when they do the calculations. This is what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of interest tables for a bank or something, but actually it's not that. And it's essential in setting up a horoscope. And a lot of calculation is required, of course, to reach the conclusion and then give the person the information that they would want.
Now, how long does it take to do these computations?
Well, if you do them by hand, it takes at least 45 minutes.
Oh, so now you say that there's new technology in using the computer that saves so much time.
It saves
now, what does it reduce the time to?
Well, depending on the type of computer program you've got, it can go anywhere from about 10 minutes to about 2 or 3, depending on what you want and the type of program that you have.
Ooh, wow.
Very convenient.
I was wondering, you gave me some pretty positive comments. Is it true that there are the negative aspects? You know, when I'll die, perhaps? Is that included in there?
No, I don't do that. However, there are negative aspects. Definitely, no one is perfect, and Sure, everyone has negative aspects, weak points, things that they're not really that confident about. As the case may be parental, for example, difficult parental things, that sort of thing. We mentioned a few of them generally here in terms of any tendency you might have toward occasional emotional depression, some difficulties in your personal life possibly at times, and sometimes a tendency to go to extremes a bit.
That's interesting. So I gave you my birthday, and I got the information based on where I was born and such. What do you think now upon meeting me? Did that change from just based on factual information presented before?
No, everything I gave you was done and set up by me and analyzed by me before we met. So the information I gave you here would have been what I would have given you if, for example, we had never met. And I did this in some other way as opposed to an interview.
Now, you're going to have to be very competent in math in order to be involved in astrology, or can you not be
Actually, I'm not that competent in math. In fact, I don't like it very much. You don't,
That's the same for me.
you don't have to be that competent in it. You have to learn the basics of setting up a horoscope, of course, and anyone with a little background and persistence can learn that, in my opinion. If you want to go in the more sophisticated versions of astrology, covering trigonometry, other fields, then yes, you would do research, that sort of thing. Then you certainly would have to be very competent in it. There are some statisticians, for example, who do a lot of research along those certain aspects of astrology, and yes, they're very competent in it. For the usual astrologer who's dealing with his clients, you just have to learn, you do have to learn the basics. It does take a while, and certainly some math is required. But now with a computer, of course, even that is cooled down, although I always recommend that anybody getting into astrology does know how to do the basics himself.
That's a good thing now. You know, we do have computers, so it's certainly a benefit. I was wondering if tarot cards, you know, the placement of the tarot cards I've seen, or palm reading and astrology, are they all the same?
No, they're not. I actually can do tarot cards and have done them for people occasionally. It's a very secondary thing. They have nothing to do with each other, actually. Tarot cards are simply cards, 78 of them, many different decks, often very beautifully decorated, that sort of thing. Each card has a meaning. Each meaning is a symbol of something else. What you do is that you have the person ask you the question, you lay out the cards, you give them an answer based on certain meanings, formats, etc. Palmistry, I'm not a palmist. I know a little about it. I don't do it. I have some friends that are interested in it. That, of course, reads the lines on the hand. In my opinion, this business with the tarot, palmistry, and some other fields, a lot of that acts in terms of the person's intuition. And therefore, if a person is intuitive or has a feel for that kind of thing, he can often give you a good reading. If he can't, he won't. It's not the kind of thing where anybody can learn the meanings and then give you a good reading. Anyone can learn the meanings of the tarot cards, true, if they want to memorize them. But putting them together is the thing. As with a lot of this stuff, it requires a kind of a holistic or intuitive type of an attitude. If you can't do that or you don't like it, you're not going to relate to it.
Oh, thank you. Oh, we're going to go away for a break. And in our next segment, we'll have a psychologist joining us and discussing that and its relationship to astrology. So we'll be right back. Our guest this segment is Dr. Roger Harnish, and he prefers to be referred to as Roger. Where is it that you work?
I teach psychology at RIT here in Rochester.
And how long have you been a psychologist?
Well, I've had my PhD for 16 years, and I've been teaching at RIT for 15 years.
15 years. So you're going to have an anniversary. Let's congratulate you.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you believe in astrology?
Well, as we were discussing before the show, I'm sort of a divided mind about it. As a scientist, no, I don't think that there is any scientific proof of astrology. The research that I've read doesn't seem to show that astrology, it makes predictions, but it doesn't try to make precise predictions. And so it's really difficult to judge whether or not a prediction made by astrology is accurate or not. One way we've looked at it is to ask several astrologers, given the same birthday and time and location, to drop charts and see if the charts come out the same. And very often they haven't. But another part of my mind says...
Now, what was different? You know, what were different about the charts?
Some charts were saying that a person had a tendency to be, for example, angry a lot, or have more extreme emotions, while other charts were saying that they were a middle-of-the-road person and didn't have extremes. And so it was supposed to be the same person, and yet different astrologers had interpreted the information differently. It might mean that some of the astrologers were not really good astrologers, and that that was the problem. Or it could mean that astrology isn't really scientific. As I said, it's difficult because you're left with questions like that. And another part of my mind understands that the scientific rules are only one part of things that human beings can understand. We have a part of our mind that appreciates patterns and possibilities, and we can all understand those. Mm-hmm. And astrology is about those possibilities. And it interests me in those terms.
So psychologists must have facts. It must have proof. Is that correct?
Yes, the psychologist, the scientist wants facts.
Why is that?
Well, what good would it do us to name something or think about something if we didn't know if it was going to be the same the next time we talked about it or thought about it? If we couldn't know or predict that it was going to stay rather stable, and if it was always changing, how could we have knowledge? So the scientist feels as though he or she is in the pursuit of this knowledge, and therefore in the pursuit of facts or stable kinds of information. And information that can be verified from one person to another person, or from one time to another time.
I see, but the idea that psychologists have, I'm sure that there's many different opinions, but they believe in astrology. Some will say that they do, others say that they don't. So which is right? You know, you're talking about PhDs in psychology, and they disagree.
That's a good question. If you're saying that I can believe in astrology as a process, as a phenomenon, but not know that it has been scientifically proven, that's true. Psychologists will argue, and they do.
Oh.
And that's one of the reasons they call psychology a pseudoscience. It's not a true science like physics or chemistry or mathematics. And we're still hopefully in our birth as a science.
Okay, you're based on facts. You know, astrology is based on mathematics and these tables and based in fact. Would you not agree?
Well, I don't know if you've heard of the phenomenon of biorhythms. I can explain it quickly. Biorhythms say that at the time we are born, that perhaps 3 rhythms, physical energy, intelligence, and emotional energy, starts and proceeds in a definite, specific mathematical relationship the rest of our lives. And so it can be charted mathematically. But scientifically, we've investigated biorhythms, and we know that they're not true. And so even though you say there are mathematics involved, that does not make something, the way you use the mathematics depends on whether you have a truth or not the fact that mathematics are involved.
So I'm saying that science can be proven, and the intuitive aspect can still be based on fact? Or?
So far, no, we don't have any proof of intuition. I think most psychologists believe that there is a part of the mind that we could call intuitive that does things that we don't understand at present. But does that mean that we will never understand it or have factual information about intuition, that it's something beyond fact? Or does it mean that we're limited at the present, that we don't know enough to be able to say what is factually true about intuition and what isn't? It's a dilemma in our science. We really don't know. We really don't know.
So you're believing in people that can see into the future. Do you believe that people can?
I believe that it's possible.
Why do you think maybe it's possible?
Well,
Why that hesitation?
Well, the scientific part of my mind, the rule-based part of my mind, understands time as something that has a start and a finish, and it goes in one direction only. And you talk about minutes and seconds and hours, and you talk about days or weeks or months. And you can't go backwards, you can't go sideways. It only has one direction. And therefore, we can understand it, we can make predictions scientifically. But another part of my mind, and everybody's mind, is capable of appreciating time as a pattern, like a ball, that you can go anywhere on its surface or inside, and you can get any pattern. If I gave you a ball, and I asked you to stick a pin inside of the ball and go into the center, you could do that from any point and still reach the center. And it's not as if I gave you a ruler and said, stick the pin from one end of the ruler to the other. There would be only one choice. Okay? So it's 2 different ways of looking at time.
Why not, you know, the forwards and coming back in time? Why?
Well, if time is more like a ball, then you could. Okay? If time is truly that way, and we don't know, science doesn't study time that way, as if it were a ball, if it could come back on itself or go in different paths. But the human beings have thought about time in that way. We've thought about having lives that we've lived before and coming back like in a circle or a ball. And we think about predicting the future or being able to see into somebody else's past. And so our intuitive mind, that you asked me about the intuitive mind, thinks of time this way, as though it doesn't have the same limits, that it doesn't have to follow one path in one direction. And I intuitively feel that that might be true for time. The scientific part of me, if I do science, I don't deal with time that way. And so I do both things in my life.
Oh, very interesting. Now, some people think of seeing into their past, into their past lives as a negative or dangerous. Do you see it that way?
Well, no. I don't know why it would be dangerous.
Well, you know, perhaps looking into the future and they were a different person in the past. And they, you know, they become immobilized by that knowledge that they've gained. So do you see a danger in that?
Oh, I certainly do. That has to do with what we believe. And For example, one of the most dramatic forms of belief causing problems is voodoo death, that you can believe that you're going to die, and you will, under some circumstances, die because of your belief. That is very dangerous. That's true. But the belief of time as a ball does not tend to believe that, therefore, if you see the future now, that you have to experience that future. Because remember, it's like a ball. The future is only one possible future, only one possible pathway. And so I felt like your question about the future asked me to think of the future as though it was like a railroad track. The train would get on and only go in one direction. And if you saw the future, you had to encounter that future. And I don't think the intuitive belief about seeing the future feels that the future is fixed, that it is unchangeable.
So there could be different ways of getting to that future. You know, different paths you could take?
Different paths that you could take, and perhaps a possibility of changing the future that you saw.
Ooh, okay. Well, now our time is up. We'll need to come back for another segment, and we'll give our audience an opportunity to ask questions. We'll ask Phil Baker to rejoin us. So sit right back, and we'll be here.
Thank you. Those are good questions.
Now we have Roger and Phil, and our audience will address questions to them. Take it away.
I was wondering if you provide an interpreter, Phil, if somebody came to you.
It hasn't happened so far. If it did, I would certainly try to get one. Or I haven't done that sort of thing yet. I have done write-ups, but I haven't yet done that.
How long would it take to write it all out back and forth? Maybe it would be better to have an interpreter. It would be easier for me.
It probably would be better to have an interpreter because the interview type format gives you a chance to get a lot more detail than you would get if I wrote it up. If I wrote it up, it would take page after page after page.
I just want to make sure. From your experience, is there anyone who has disagreed with the readings you have given them?
Not too often. Occasionally I'll get somebody who will disagree. As a general rule, the people have agreed. The thing is, many people do not live up to their full potential. And when you are doing a horoscope, you're taking into account all that they could be doing, for example, or could develop. And in my experience, most people develop maybe 15 or 20% of it for one reason or another. So sometimes, for example, a person may have a talent or a difficulty that they may not be aware of. And, you know, you bring it out, and sometimes they'll acknowledge it, sometimes they won't. Most people feel it's fairly accurate. Once in a while, I'll get someone who will violently disagree. In the 15 years I have been doing this, I've only had one person walk out. And that was over, it was the fact that we just couldn't get along. It's the only time it's ever happened to me.
I'm really interested in what you've been saying. Jesus Christ picked 12 apostles. Is there any relationship to this? Jesus Christ, he did pick 12 different personalities and different with each apostle. Does that relate with the 12 birth signs?
In my opinion, no. However, there have been astrologers who are oriented toward a Christian format who have made very strong interpretations to that. Not only that, it's possible, and I have read books along this line, where some people have found a lot of astrological symbolism in certain elements of the Bible as well. I myself don't get into that too much one way or the other, but I have read books where they do.
I just wondered if that was the choices for the 12 birth signs.
Well, it's very interesting how these number symbolisms do keep coming up. It's true, you have the 12 apostles, you've got the 12 signs of the Western zodiac, you've got the 12 signs of the Chinese or Japanese zodiac, and so on and so forth. There have been books written about 7, 12, 4, this sort of thing. I'm not really sure why these number patterns in different fields of activity or study or whatnot do keep coming up, but I have seen them. You're right.
I went to the state fair, and I paid for $1 to get my palm read. You know, you put your hand on the machine. And what I read, it really did kind of match with my personality. Are those things made up, or is there any fact to that? Should I believe it? Is that something that I should believe?
I myself write a column in one of the local papers, and it's published every week. And I've got a little disclaimer in the beginning that it's for general interest only, or general purpose only. I can't speak for palmistry because I'm not a palmist. Speaking for astrology, you have to, from an astrologer standpoint, you have to have a horoscope done in detail in terms of your day, month, your place, that sort of thing. I myself would be rather suspicious of going to the state fair and putting, $1 in and getting a preset reading. So I would assume that that would be the same for palmistry as for astrology. I do know some people that have been interested in palmistry, and they go into it quite a bit. Actually, sometimes they'll give you like a half hour or more on it. So if it were me, it's fun and it's interesting, but I would not give that as much importance as I would give something in more detail.
Thank you. Phil, I'd like to ask you a question. I know it's easy to give the positive readings, but what about giving people negative readings? Suppose someone asked you if they wanted to know when they were going to die. Could you tell somebody that? Is that hard to tell, for you to tell somebody that kind of information? How do you handle it?
First of all, I don't personally believe that you can predict exactly when someone's going to die. I have met astrologers who believe it, and in India, where they are more fatalistic due to the Hindu culture, they tend to get into that a bit more than we do here. Even if I could do it, I wouldn't. It's just not good practice. And as I say, I don't believe you can. In terms of other things, however, sure, if a person's going to have some problems regarding, let's say, work or a relationship or any number of things, and I see the potential in the horoscope, I will definitely give them this information relative to timing, and I will also give them this information in terms of, hopefully, if they know about it, they can handle it. It's not a fatalistic type of situation at all. The value in knowing it is in being able to do something about it.
Roger, what is your philosophy? I think it's very different. You believe in being able to analyze people's personalities by reading the charts and figuring out everything. I really don't think that can happen. I agree with Roger more myself. Suppose that you, I really have no idea. I really just disagree with what you did.
Okay, I can respond to that. I think I understand your question. One of the difficulties is that with astrology, tarot, palm reading, those types of things, they don't tell you specific information. They don't say you're going to inherit $100 or $100,000. They say you're going to find money or you're going to come into money. They use wording or concepts or ideas that are possibilities or potentials or tendencies, and that means that they might happen or they might not be realized. And therefore, if you talk about a tendency, I could say that you would have a tendency to get rich. And if you tell me, well, at the end of your life you never got rich, I'll say, well, you didn't explore that tendency well enough. And so that's the difficulty. And I do have problems with that aspect of astrology as well as the other parapsychological phenomenon, that it's not specific enough. I can't tell if it's going to be accurate, and then I can start believing it. And if I believe it enough, then it will happen because I believe it, and not necessarily because it was predicted to happen. And how am I going to tell the difference? And it also gets scary. What if they tell me something bad and I believe it and I make it happen? Then I'm in trouble. So yes, I do have definite concerns, and I think I understand your question when you ask it that way.
I'd like to thank you. We have one little bit left. Come right back after this commercial word. I'd like to thank our guest and our interpreter, Aaron, our guest, Phil. He's our astrologer, so don't forget. And our psychologist, Roger. And again, our interpreter, Kip. Many thanks to all of you. If you have an interest and would like to have a reading of your astrology, then we'll have an announcement for Phil on where you can contact him. And if you have any comments about the show or any ideas, please send them to us. And those also will be in the credits. And we'll be waiting for you for our next program. Don't miss it. Thank you again.